Welcome back, baseball fans, to the 1970-73 Carryover League Draft 7th round selections. All players taken from the year 1971. Some guys were already announced earlier in the draft when teams could take two players because they had the rights to a second player in a given year, and he was not as good as the first year based on best player available parameters. So let's get started here. It was a fun round, actually. The 6th round and 5th round were rough for some teams, but we had some nice picks here in the 7th round. Cleveland, back-to-back nice picks here from 6 and 7. They take another Indian. They've been taking Indians 4 straight. Lowenstein, Hilgendorf, Tidrow, and Lamb, and they're all in their own good years. Ray Lamb is a selection. 3.35 ERA in 1971. And the Indians will probably put him in a long relief role as they've filled up their rotation. The Indians also made a trade in this round where they moved Denny Riddleberger to the Texas Rangers, and the Rangers drafted Mike Kilkenny, a lefty starter for them, because if you recall, the Indians had 3 lefty relievers and no lefty starters. So now Cleveland has the full complement, and does Texas. So it was a good move for both squads. But anyway, let's go to the 2nd round pick. Colorado, Dick Drago. Real great pitcher here. You're wondering why he's so good. It's because their 71 guy was also a starter in the Colorado rotation, Ron Reed. And so they didn't announce Drago at the time because they weren't sure which year Drago would go into, 73, 72, 71, and now we know it's 71. His ERA is about the same as it was in 72, but it's whatever fits. You have to have 2 players in each of the 4 years for a total of 8. So Dick Drago, nice card, 17-game winner, 2.98 ERA, 1.23 WHIP in 71. We're looking at all 7102s. If a player was already card was shown because they were announced, we'll just move past it. All right, Toronto, making some nice picks for an expansion team that doesn't have a whole lot of hope, but they sure do play tough and build a tough team, a tough out team. Another pitching and defense, and the worst offense probably in baseball is Toronto, which isn't bad. I mean, it'll get you to compete. Bill Voss, corner outfielder, played for Boston last year, came through Milwaukee organization. Great corner outfield defense, and has a surprising amount of pop in his bat for his 71 card. All right, the Cubs back on the clock after 2 rounds with players they already added. They found a gem here in the 7th round. Lloyd Allen, 21 years old, out of the Angels farm system, 2.49 ERA. One of the top ERAs of 1971, with a whip of 1.22. And him and Ray Burris will be asked to close out games for the Cubs. This is a nice Cubs roster. In most divisions, they'd be considered a favorite, but they're going to have to run, stick their chin out there against the Reds and Pirates and hope for the best. All right. The Padres announced Clay Dalrymple earlier in the draft. And here, the Rangers, this is where they took Mike Kilkenny, but then traded him to Cleveland. And Cleveland got a token in the deal because Riddleberger is better than Kilkenny. All right, the next pick. The Atlanta Braves needed a lefty reliever, and you don't want to add any left-handed throwers at this point in the draft if you don't have to, because they're not going to be that great. They added Don Eddy, who, by the way, 2 years ago, the same card was on the Oriole franchise. The Orioles won the World Series, and then they cut him because they were too scared to bring him in any of their games. So he was out of baseball last year, and the Braves are inviting him back this year, knowing he's got a World Series ring. A 2.38 ERA, but it's 22 innings, and he walked 19 guys. So he's got a 1.67 WHIP, but it's a fun card. All right. Milwaukee decided to improve a player for the first time in the draft, improving Rick Reichard, who they got in the offseason. His defense improves, a little more batting average and a little more slugging. So win-win all around for the Brewers there, trying to get better. The 9th pick, Ohio. Speaking of getting better, Ohio players, they improved Doc Ellis to his 1971 card where he was 19-9, 3.06 ERA. Is that the year of the no-no? You got a no-no going. That might be the year of the no-no. Anyway, Ohio's going to boast Don Wilson, Al Downing, Rudy May, and Doc Ellis. That is an outstanding 4-man pitching staff. That's the best part of this team, their rotation. Bullpen's awful, and the hitting is good. Defense is bad. All right. Arizona, again, we mentioned they're done. They're just patiently twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the token round so they can improve players if they want. The Expos found a nice little player here after further review. They needed basically a guy who could play some second and thirds, DH, sort of like what they did in the last round, where they were looking more for defense. Now they were just looking for just the ability to be more of a DH and then slide into those other positions. And they found Rich McKinney, who actually has got some nice numbers. He's a 271 hitter with a 334, 377, 711. Not bad. His card kind of slipped through the cracks there. Get a 271 hitter this late in the draft. Particularly a guy who can play the infield and do that. All right, the Cardinals, with the 12th pick, announced Rick Wise earlier in the draft. Florida Marlins, with the 13th pick, had the rights to Casey Cox and decided, you know what, we better add him. He's got a 3.98 ERA, and after what some other teams are drafting, we're kind of scared to go fishing in the deep water there. So let's just hold on to what we got with Casey Cox for one more year, and then we'll look for a pitcher next year. Again, he's a number 4 or 5 starter, swing starter. The Colorado Rockies had to add a right-handed starter, and they found a nice guy. They found Lou Krause. Nobody wanted Lou Krause. He was 8-12, but he had a 2.94 ERA and a 1.25 WHIP. Did it with, I believe, the Milwaukee Brewers. And I think the win-loss record scared teams away, but this is a nice card. And the White Sox get it. Again, we talked about the White Sox making some nice moves. Between them and the Brewers, the Twins, and the Royals, that division is going to be really interesting this year. Don't know how it's going to play out. I spotted some problems with Kansas City after all my pumping my fists about them. We'll look at that a little sooner. Pretty soon here. All right. The Pirates needed a lefty in the bullpen. They knew the Padres added Randy Jones, so they had their full 3 lefties, and they had the rights to Dick Kelly, and they asked the Padres, can we have Dick Kelly? And they gave the Padres a token, and they took a Padre reliever named Dick Kelly. His stats are good until you look at something that doesn't show up in the stats, which is how many triples he allowed to left-handed batters. As he has a triple on 6 and 7 automatic on his card. The only baseball player in history to have that. And the Pirates, they experimented with the Julio Navarro card of 1970 last year, and they're going to do another experiment with the Dick Kelly card this year. They have plenty of fallback options, as Ramon Hernandez is their lefty setup man, and they also have lefty in the rotations of what's his name? Not Blass, Moose, the other guy. His name escapes me at the moment. Who is Pittsburgh's lefty starter? Forgot already. Well, I'll go check real quick since you're all curious. It is Jim Rooker. That's right. They acquired him in the offseason. A really good Jim Rooker card. So they're not really hurting for left-handed pitchers in Pittsburgh. All right, Seattle. They realized that after improving 2 guys, they still had holes in their roster. And the holes happen to be at second base and third base. But they found some nice prospecting here. Jerry Devanin card was actually for Baltimore in 71. Would play on that World Series team as a utility player. He's got a nice on base percentage. He has a .235 batting average, but he's got a .340 on base, and he's also a 3 at second, third, and short. And they tentatively are looking to add Joe Foy in the 8th round, and if he's available, and then Devanin and Foy would play second and third in either defensive alignment if Foy's available. So if somebody wants to ruin Seattle's dreams, they would take Joe Foy in the top half of the 8th round. All right, Philadelphia announced Jerry Johnson earlier in the draft when they announced Joe Horner. Yankees, another smart move here. They got a nice little corner outfielder to caddy for Ron Blomberg, who can't field very well. It's this Mike Hirschberger, a 2-2 in center and right. But his bat and on base, .377 on base percentage. It's a nice card. We had his 70 card in the Winter Baseball Classic. Wasn't very good. And lo and behold, he has a better 1971. And that's what the Yankees took. Yankees are doing smart moves in this draft. They're finding positional flexibility. They've got a great pitching staff. They got Thurman Munson's best year. Looking good. It's just, again, Orioles, Red Sox, Yankees. You never know what happens until one of these teams is going to get really super lucky and one will get really unlucky, and that's how it'll play out. Portland. They added Jerry Kenny earlier in the draft when they announced Mark Belanger, so we knew about that. Okay, the Twins. Hey, this is a nice pick. Another sleeper. We mentioned earlier Lou Krause as a sleeper starter who went to the White Sox up here. And the guy ranked slightly above him is Tom Murphy, who pitched 243 innings. And he joins Burt B. Homebly 11 at the top of the Minnesota rotation. Believe it or not, I mean, they have Jim Cott can't pitch on 3 days rest. They'll try and pitch Cott as much as they can with Bly 11, but Murphy can pitch on 3 days rest, and they got young Dave Goltz. So they slacked on starting pitching to work on their defense and bullpen in this draft, but they managed to survive with two. Now, Tom Murphy was 6-17 for a really bad California team, but it stands to reason for a good Minnesota team he might have a better record. His whip is 1.27. That is a good pick. He was the last 1971 pitcher to pitch on 3 days rest available, and he's good. So that's a win-win for the Twins. So their draft has been a little all over the place, really. Started good. Chico Cardinals getting better is nice. Heisel. Actually, it's a really good draft now that I look at it more. I think they might pass the Royals as favorites in this division now. We'll get to the Royals in a couple picks. All right, Vegas. Another nice guy just sitting out there. Nobody saw him. Jim Nettles. He's a 2 in center field. He's a left-handed batter who, by the way, does okay against left-handed pitching. He's only a 250 hitter, but he hits about 250 against lefties and righties with power both ways. So he's balanced. So he's mediocre, but at least you don't have to worry about a platoon. You can just leave him out, and he'll play good defense for you. And it's his best year in the decade. So it's a win-win for a Vegas expansion team. All right, Kansas City Royals. Ouch. So Kansas City got to the 7th round of the draft and realized the harsh reality of what happens when you go for the everything on offense by Amos Otis, Lou Piniella, Pat Kelly, Ed Kirkpatrick. They had only had 5 pitchers. So they still need to add 3 more pitchers, and 2 of them have to be left-handed. So they're the only team that needs 2 left-handed pitchers. Needing 1 is bad, but they need 2. So they picked Rich Hinton with a 4.44 ERA to be basically the second lefty in the bullpen. They already have one lefty in the pen now. And who is that exactly? And let's go take a peek at who their only lefty is on this team at this point. It is... Oh, Bill Butler, right. So Bill Butler is in the rotation. But they're hoping that Bob Veal's card will be available in the 8th round. It's sitting out there and no one's picked it yet. So they're hoping it's Veal. If not, it could get ugly. And this is not what we hoped for Kansas City. I just been pushing this team so much, and they might have some problems with pitching this year. All right, Houston announced Denny LeMaster earlier in the draft when they signed Jack Billingham. Baltimore, this is the bring back the old guard. Baltimore Orioles who moved on and come back home. They added Kurt Blefary, who left after the 66 series. They brought back Kurt Motton after bringing back Johnny Oates. So Baltimore actually has an all Baltimore offense, as it turns out. They are a franchise that can do that because so many of their players move on to other baseball teams. There's probably 40 Orioles playing in baseball, so they can go outside and bring them back home. All right, Oakland A's. Well, they finally had to go outside of Oakland to get a player. If you look right here, the first 6 guys are just fine-tuning the machine, the dynasty. But in the 7th round, talk about championship pedigree. Ron Taylor has played on the Orioles and the Mets in the last 2 years with World Series rings. He was put on waivers, and the Oakland A's added him into their bullpen with a 3.65 ERA. Ron Taylor, good at getting righties out. They have Bob Locker who can get lefties out. So that's a nice little platoon in the bullpen. All right, the Dodgers, they need bodies from the year of 1971. They have a starting 9 versus right-handed pitching. They just got to work on what they do against left-handed pitching. They got a Hal Lanier to play shortstop because Bill Russell is a 4 at short. So Bill Russell can be a DH, and he can also be a 1 in the outfield. So Bill Russell does not have to play shortstop anymore. They can have Hal Lanier and Frank Baker man the position in the short term. Hal Lanier they got from the Giants, or the Giants let him go because the Giants had Chris Spire. They didn't need Hal Lanier anymore. And Lanier's actually got a good glove at third base now as well. All right, the Angels added Jim Mclaughlin earlier in the draft when they announced Jay Johnstone. All right, the Cincinnati Reds. Cincinnati is probably the only team in the league who can add a 166 hitter because, it's the Reds. So they drafted John Vukovic to play 1 E22 third base for Tony Perez late in games. And actually, he can also platoon as a third base against lefties, and Tony Perez can be a DH. So Vukovic will be on the field for the Reds as they close out games. So if you hit a ground ball third X, Tony Perez won't blow it. It'll be an inning double play with John Vukovic. This is kind of like the fine-tuning of the Reds, just trying to look for every possible scrap, every crumb to make their team better. I mean, they weren't going to actually sign a guy to start. All their positions are full. So they just strictly got probably the only defensive replacement at third base who probably won't bat much. By the way, John Vukovic has been a 1 at third base in 3 or 4 years in Strat-O-Matic and never hit above 200. It's a very weird situation. All right. The Giants added and this is another team. Check out what the Giants have been doing in this draft. All Giants, McCovey, Marichal, Barr, Matthews, Fuentes, Goodson. They don't have to go outside the organization. They brought up Don Carruthers, a reliever, 21 years old. Basically, they have Randy Moffett available, but Moffett needs a couple years to get better. So they'll probably cut Carryover in a couple years and bring in Moffett for long relief work. All right, Boston had the rights to Jerry Moses. They actually dangled him for trade. And they said, anybody, you want Jerry Moses? We don't really want him anymore. We don't need him. We have Carlton Fisk. But they have to have a backup catcher, and with no takers, then they simply re-signed Jerry Moses. That's why it's in blue here. He was a keeper. And Jerry Moses, it's $227, but again, he's a Red Sox, and he's batting up Carlton Fisk. No big deal there. Sometimes it's fun just to have guys who play for a team to continue to play for a team regardless of his stats, you know. So Fisk and Moses will continue. All right, the Tigers actually announced Willie Horton with this pick, and that would be a ridiculous pick in the 7th round. But that's because they had Norm Cash as the first 1971 player, so they announced Willie Horton. And of course, the best 7th round pick, the New York Mets, because they announced Tom Seaver in the 71. And so, obviously, nobody's better than Tom Seaver. So, Cleon Jones is the second player from 71 who becomes the 7th round pick. Cleon Jones only hit .319 with 856 OPS. That concludes the 7 rounds of the draft. One more round to go, and then the token round of the draft. Fun times here in the 70-73 Carryover League. Thanks for checking it out. We'll see you next time.